Here we are playing Nations in Arms. Is that it? Yeah. I get it confused with Amateurs 2 Arms, and somehow I'm not sure whether it should be in or at because of that. Anyway, we finished the 1792 year, and we're entering 1793. Some exciting stuff has happened, actually. Wormster is moving the Austrians through Italy because I saw that as an easier route in than pushing them up into, Austrian territory and then directly into France. The Austrians gathered an army here under this dude, Teschen, which marched in, took Reims, Paris, and then Orleans. Nice march through, but the French have had their come up or their revenge, essentially. They shifted forces from over here to cover an attack on Dijon that came through here and drove that off. And they moved, I think these are Austrians and not Prussians. Looks like it. They moved into Reims and sieged the Austrians there. So they've kind of cut Teschen's army off. It's not necessarily out of supply, because supply is determined at the moment you move. And since it moved already, it wasn't out of supply last turn. So it didn't suffer any attrition effects yet, but it's in a dangerous, exposed position. And you don't check supply at the end, like, you can't march into supply. Someone else has to establish it for you, which is what the force in Reims was already doing and the move to Dijon was doing. At this point, these guys are cut off, and something in the coalition is going to have to open up their supply route. Now, there are some Prussians back here who might be able to do so. And of course, there's the Austrians here. There's also the possibility of more troops showing up. And that might be bad, because they might be French troops. I may have been suckered in, as it were, as the coalition into taking Paris and Orleans, because it looked like the French were in trouble. But the chip pull didn't necessarily work out in my favor. A winter quarters could have come up or whatever and left me in a very good position, because both sides kind of delayed a little bit. But yeah, it was kind of an exciting start to things. And there's an interesting sort of war of maneuver going on in this game, in a sense that I don't feel like I've seen in any other Napoleonic grand campaign game. I don't know how I feel about it, but it definitely feels like I've got more of a capacity to do loose maneuvers and whatnot. So in something like Empires in Arms, with its area movement, and there's a lot of area and point-to-point, grand campaign stuff, you don't have the same capability to put yourself in a stupid location. I mean, you do, but you got to be stupider, I think. In War and Peace, it's easier to assess what the enemy can do in my head. So I don't think I would have gotten into this kind of exposed position, nor would I have thought, hey, France is just fucking open. My army can just roll in there. You do have the same kind of concept of like a huge stack of units being your best fighting force, your hammer that you want to put into the game in War and Peace. But the difference is, and maybe I'll be able to bring some of the thinking from this into War and Peace and play it better on sort of that operational movement type mechanism. But it's something that I've always kind of missed, because what ends up happening is I move my forces forward, all over the place, right? So that they don't take attrition. I gather them up into a big stack, and then the big stacks are like facing each other off. And one person, maybe at a disadvantage. They don't want to fight, but they don't want to stay loose because then they'll be at a worse disadvantage and they'll just get scooped up. But here, one thing that's significantly different is the limited number of armies that you can have. And in this scenario especially, only Austria was able to build an army in 1792, which is a key factor because they're the only ones able to have that big stack of units. Now, I'm sure the 1805 scenario is not like that, and the 1805 in War and Peace is not like that either. Another big difference here is you don't just suffer attrition for being a big stack of units, which you do in War and Peace. Being out of supply is a problem, but large stacks are a problem in that game. So that kind of changes the nature of things as well. We'll see how how this game plays out in various scenarios, and I'll keep it on my mind as to how it aligns with War and Peace. But anyway, so far I'm really excited about the kind of maneuvering that we're seeing. It feels like a different kind of thinking than I've had in either the War and Peace or the Empires and Arms type game. But that may be specific to this scenario. I kind of felt like it was going to be a cakewalk for the coalition. I don't think so now. Those moves the French made have really put the coalition on the ropes. And the historical movements of the coalition were nowhere near this aggressive. Right, I'm back up here. It's actually Monday morning, longer break than usual. Mainly because I'm fading less and less into existence as things go. Now, this is something we haven't done before. It's a spring interphase that's in springtime. The new event cards are added to the deck. I pulled them out. I haven't shuffled them in yet because the French have some interesting options just before this happens, right? The White Cockade card, which is what they're holding, can't be played until Committee of Public Safety and King of France Executed have been played. So there's that. But I have the Committee on Public Safety, which allows the French to draw another event card of his choice during future spring turns. France may not take diplomacy actions until Directory has been played, once this is done. This is not the full terror. There's something else. I think that, yeah, there's the terror card here. When this is played, every time a French leader commanding a force is defeated in battle, he is removed from the game on a 4-6. Not a good card for the French. They don't want that. I'm just pointing out the Committee on Public Safety, or of Public Safety, is going to cause more problems. Now, there are a couple interesting cards I could grab for this. King of France Executed. First of all, that's not a one-time thing. Every spring phase, from the way this is worded, I will be allowed to draw another event card of my choice. I don't know if that happens before or after a shuffling. Every turn there's going to be a shuffling, so it kind of makes sense that it would happen. Yeah, so I'm going to play this. The fact is, I'm not allowed to make diplomacy actions if I play this. That's the penalty for this card. But I can't do diplomacy on the major powers from what I understand of this scenario. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all the diplomacy rules are in play. And I'm not really that impressed with what I can do with the minors. I think I'm best off with this. The card I probably most want is Carnot, but I think I'm going to reshuffle the deck and hand out the cards, and then the French get another card. I don't know where to put this to remind me that it's in play. I guess oh wait, we'll put it with Brunswick's Manifesto. It's removed from the game. And I play this before the spring interphase actually takes place. Just to make sure, because it's in future spring interphases. So it actually happens at the end of 92. I just wanted to make sure I understand what I'm doing before that. All right, so yeah, I'll shuffle the deck, and we'll come back with what the card count is and whatnot. What I was making about reshuffling is the simple fact that, like, it kind of doesn't matter. Like, I was thinking, I can pick my card, you know, before I shuffle the deck and save myself some effort. But the truth of the matter is, next turn I'm going to have to shuffle a bunch more cards in, which means that it's no big deal, unless there's something else that allows you to draw additional cards, that I'm pawing through the deck after I go through the effort of shuffling. Okay, so here we are on the number of cards. Let's figure out how many each side gets. France draws 2 cards. She could draw an additional card for controlling Flanders, which I still do, I think. Don't I? No, Flanders is outside my initial national boundary. Lombardy, Venetia, Romagna, Tuscany, Piedmont, and Genoa. No, I don't have that. Rhine Confederation, Kingdom of Bavaria, I don't have that. So I'm going to get 2 cards, -1 if a War of Liberation is in Spain. Not going to happen yet. England, who's not in the war, oops, I assume the entire coalition, because this is really a 2-player game at this point for this scenario, gets 2, but if another major power has more fleets than Britain, or if enemy fleets are present, if enemy units are present in Britain. I don't think that the French have more fleets. They would be the only option. What the hell's he doing on there? Who the fuck is this? He's an army commander who got sucked in somehow. Okay, so I've got 2 French fleets out there. And yeah, he's actually a decent commander, so I don't know why he's there. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The Brits have at least 6. They have more than that. So they won't lose any. So each side is going to get 2 cards. Again, I'll draw at random like this. The French get inflation, which is a public event. One major power of your choice loses 10 pounds in the next budget phase, might be useful. And Schwann's, which is a public event that allows the counter-revolutionary factions to take effect. Obviously, I would rather play inflation, so I'm going to hold that off as my card. And the Brits get a winter campaign. During initiative of a winter turn, cancel the effects of the winter quarters marker, which is removed from the initiative pool. Every attrition check gets a +1 modifier. Weird. Like, the winter becomes conceivably longer than autumn or spring because of this. And weather gauge, every fleet of 1 squadron gains a +3 combat bonus during the first round. Nice if I need it. I have White Cockade, which I'm not allowed to play. I have no public events, so I don't play any of these at this point. But the French get an additional card of their choice. I think this may be the card I want, but that I want to play. But I gotta look, because I'm probably going to take the Carnot card, which improves all my troops. Hard call. The Carnot card gives me a +1 for every French corps. That differs from how it's worded in here, which is that the +1s yeah, it's very different from how it's noted in the cards. The cards seem to indicate that everything gets a +1 up to its bonus. This seems to say the revolutionary troops are better than otherwise. I deploy 2 army counters, Spain and Germany, an engineer unit, and 2 supply wagons, all free of cost. That's a nice pile of resources. Is that obviously I don't want to play this. Is that better than the inflation? The inflation is only going to take 10 pounds away from the coalition. I actually think Carnot is more useful. Much as I like the idea of the inflation, you know, because, hey, I can play Carnot. So here's the thing. I can play Carnot next turn anyway. I can hurt the Austrians by 10 pounds and reduce their production. 10 pounds of production in the 1792, Austria is going to get their full out of 62. Is that a worthwhile thing to do? Or, you know, is it worth delaying Carnot by a turn in order to play the inflation now? I can play the inflation next turn anyway as the public event, and it'll affect the 1794 production instead. But that 1794 production is less important. You know, that's the whole thing. It's like, how much are the French getting? The French are getting 70 production. Yeah, I don't know. I'm torn here, man. I'm torn. Also look at the special rules for the scenario. The combat modifiers for all French units are 0 at the beginning of the game until the play of the Carnot event, : French combat units with positive modifier get a +1. Not all French units get a +1, which is what that card says. I think it's easier to cope with the rules. That the French are going to have +1 to all their combat units. You know, all the combat units that have a positive will be +1 then. It's going to be about the same. But they may have a few that are zeros. And notably, things like militia would get rid of their negative modifier, stuff like that, which is just really bothersome in a way. I think we have some actually, don't we? Maybe not. Maybe everything has, no. Yeah, see, they say every French corps. That includes Cav Corps, which don't have it, and which I don't think it even makes sense for, because like the French Cav in the Revolutionary period is not as good as their later Imperial period Cav that becomes available. All kind of stuff like that. So yeah, I think I go by the scenario rules, not by the card. The real question is, how big a deal do I view the spring turn, the danger that I'm in the spring turn? And I think having an army to face the Austrian army is more important than reducing Austrian funding by 10 pounds. So we'll put this out there. This one I probably don't really need, but I got tons of space right now, so it's not really hurting me to have cards out there. No public cards for the Allies. Puts me back here. And now it's time to do the economics and budgeting. But I also get the bonuses here. 2 army counters, Spain and Germany, an engineer and 2 supply wagons. I didn't mention to this, the continental system being in effect would drop the British by a card. Historically it's not in effect yet. Like, I think even France isn't really, the term and the concept don't exist yet. Basically, it only exists once France starts conquering things. But the rules don't agree with that. So, like, this is just weird. Yeah, I honestly just don't know. But I'm not going to penalize I did not penalize the coalition at this point. Britain's not even in the war, man. First thing we do is collect resources, and especially this would matter, you know, consider this in the multiplayer game or whatever. I think each nation collects its full amount of money. So Spain, which is not in the war, will get 22, I think, plus their 5 gold and 5 commerce, okay? So they'll get 32. Britain will get that commerce, their full commerce. They're not at war with anyone. France is going to get their commerce. And now, why am I judging it this way? I'm judging it this way because war between the country and Britain, no trade points are received by either side, yet if Britain occupies. Right. Here, though, the continental system can be dictated by France. No trade are collected by Britain if part of the continental system. France receives trade pounds for each harbor, which represents an increase of the French trade over the French allies. Those pounds are reminded in the major resource power chart with the XCS notation. Well, let's take a look. Do we have any... I mean, France has no allies, so they wouldn't. But I don't think France itself is part of the continental system because they're at war with England, or they're not at war with England. You could make arguments that maybe England started a blockade ahead of time. I don't think they did, though. I don't think they do until they declare war. So we're going to play it that way. And thus, France is going to get their full quantity of cash. Look at Bray. Yeah. France is going to get their full quantity of cash in trade as well. It's not enough to make that huge a difference, even though it's like 1/8 of the money that France is going to get. So let me allocate the cash on each of these for each nation. France will get $79. Okay. I don't know why we have VPs. There really aren't any in this game. So 79. The other side of this is just plus 10. I am saying it's plus 40. I should really mark it up that way, just so that I can do this. Britain gets 103. Yeah, this isn't going to work. I'm going to have to operate on paper. The countries are going to spend as much as they can. I think they're allowed to hold, you know, that 49 in reserve if they want to. But yeah, I'm not going to be able to use counters for this because the track doesn't allow for it. Notably, at the same time, we also have a maximum number of SP that we can put on the board. That's 16. And they can only be put into armies or into forces in fortresses in their home country, as far as I recall. Yeah. Even as replacement points. So I kind of feel like I'm going to have to do each nation individually and work my way through, look at what they have as replacement points. This is going to come in as a reinforcement as well. New units I'll be piling on top of here. These can be placed ahead of time. In fact, they must be, but I will place them as needed to kind of facilitate, you know, my decision making and whatnot. We will do the French first, but everybody's actually happening simultaneously, I believe, for this. What does it say here? This is not the game that... I'm thinking back to Stellar Horizons 2 that I was playing, where there was this differentiation between what you can do simultaneously and what you can't. Actually, there is a sequence. It's not listed as something you're supposed to do here, but there is for the diplomacy, which is Spain has to go first, etc. So I think I'll do that, actually. Now, Spain is neutral right now. Decisions are made the power can produce units as while abiding with possible peace clauses. Major power can only act as... Yeah, so Spain is actually controlled by France, even though they're anti-French in this scenario. That feels wrong. I think Spain is about to become part of the coalition. The coalition should control them, even though there's this status here. I don't think there's anything special here. That covers it. No. But I think they do get to build their units, and I think so, like, if the French got to build them, they would build all kind of stupid shit, right? Which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Look at Spain. Spain has 27 bucks. They plus 5, 32 bucks. And they can build up to 7 units, 7 steps, no more than 2 of which can be cavalry. The Spanish built up a new cav unit here for 10 of those 32 bucks, plus 1 strength cav unit, and this is my army commander here, the only one I have available right now. I have no new leaders coming in 93 for the Spaniards. I assume I have no new units coming in 93, but that means if I want to build an army here, which I think I do, because this is the path that's most open, blah, 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 then I have to dismiss this leader. I will have to replace him. Well, actually I don't have to, but I may choose to replace him. I could dismiss other leaders as well at this point, but I don't want to do that. I got kind of shitty leaders in other places, and they're fine doing what they're doing. But I am going to dismiss that leader and replace him. I may dismiss this one as well, since he's going to be replaced also. I don't have to build an army, but I can rearrange my leaders essentially for free, from what I can tell by the way this is worded. It's worded in a very strange way, right? New leaders are added to the leader pool, blah, blah, blah. You have to place back in the leader pool wounded leaders from the previous year. I guess the Honors of War guy went back early, maybe. I don't know. He's not wounded. Then you may dismiss some of your leaders. They join the leader pool too. The player chooses replacing leaders as described in 4.24. I think I actually have to choose leaders at that point. But then I can choose to deploy new leaders from the pool. As far as I can see, it looks like I have almost free reign in rearranging my leaders. So I'm going to just do it that way. Just now, during the reinforcement phase. Actually, dismissal is part of this reinforcement and replacement. I think every turn I can just rearrange my leaders. This move is for $3. I'm going to buy a line infantry for in here. And then I'm going to absorb this detachment into it, so I get a full 2-point core. And now I have 6 points here. This is the most that I can hold anywhere, unless I want to buy, me an army. Now, an army costs like $8. That's a big expense at a time when I'm not in the war, and I think it might be useful to have multiple forces moving forward. At this point, I've used up out of my 7, and this is, going to be really much, much harder to cope with. I may need to use pencil and paper or something to cope with other nations. But with Spain, I've used up 3 of these. So I have 4 more steps that I can build, none of which can be cavalry. And I have $19. Now, 4 infantry steps would cost me $12. In total, I bought myself 2 steps of cav here, 1 step of infantry here, that's 3, a step of infantry here, that's 4, that's this guy here, 2 steps of infantry here, 5, 6, he's within stacking limits, and then a detachment there, another step of infantry, 7 units, costing me 10 for the 2 cavalry, and 5 infantry was 15, so $25, leaving me 7, which equals the 32 in total. 7's not enough to build the army. I don't really think I want to build the army anyway at this point. Like I said, it's a little expensive. And now I reposition my commanders. I have to put a 3-point commander here because anything else would be insufficient to command that. I could put a 2nd commander there. Let's flip these navies over like the Brits are. How about that? I could push another commander into there. I have to put a commander here. I'll put a 2-star commander there. This guy could actually command an army, so he seems like a good choice. I have 1 remaining leader, because I didn't dismiss him. I could either put him here, give this more flexibility to move that detachment, but detachments have some neat flexibility to them anyway. So I'm going to actually put this 2nd leader here, thereby using all my leaders. And that is the Spanish production. That means I go to the next nation in order. And I'm using this diplomacy order because why not? Turkey. Prussia will be next. I am going to break because this was kind of an expensive thing to do mentally and leave batteries charging and whatnot. And then I'll do the Prussian economy next in a lot less detail. But yeah, I mean, they may have some damaged units here and stuff like that. This Monday, about 11 a.m., I wasted most of the morning. Did listen to a podcast and kind of snoozed for an hour. But I gotta say, life kind of just is designed so it sucks for me, right? An example is, before I get to the next nation, which I'm not going to do in the detail I did for Spain. So I've been stuck in a spiral since like sometime after my friend left and I got the porch done and everything. Well, I got help getting a couple of stairs put in on my porch, where I have done nothing, right? And I haven't been able to go shopping or anything. And maybe I go today, maybe I go tomorrow, maybe I never go, whatever. But I'm probably too sleepy today. But last time I tried to engineer staying awake, it threw my schedule off worse and in the wrong direction. But then last night, I've been having some trouble with my toilet. In that, you know, I have to keep going in and playing with the whatever the little floater balance is, and last night it won't stop. Like no matter what I get the floater to, it's still squirting water out, or not squirting water out, but sending a low flow of water through, which to me means that that whole thing has to be replaced. Okay. I decide I don't want the water running, unnecessarily, so I'll go back to what I was doing before I replaced it last time. It's really a shame. I bought a replacement. It's the toilet I use the most, so whatever. It probably wears out quicker, but I replaced it like just a year or two ago, and I got kind of a shitty replacement that had a problem, but I needed to just replace a washer within it. Like, they cleared the charge on it and whatever. I replaced a washer in it and it worked fine. So I'm like, okay, I got a free replacement essentially, because I actually had a washer that was good for it, or a gasket or something. I don't know, a rubber washer. Okay, yeah, I think it's a gasket, but now it's not working again. Buy a cheap piece of plastic shit and get it for free. And don't be too upset when it doesn't work. But I go to shut the water off, and that doesn't work now. Now it did before because I replaced the thing, but now I can't shut the water off to my toilet, and so the water's just trickling out no matter what. And that means a complex kind of combination of things. Among other things, I'm going to have to shut off the main and all kind of stuff like that. And, when it takes me a month to figure out that to go shopping now, a thing I used to do every 2 weeks, regularly on a specific day, I don't even know if it's going to happen. Obviously the toilet's going to get worse and worse, and I have to do something about it, but it's going to be 2 steps of work, and oh boy. Anyway, we were on to the Prussians. I mean, and eventually teeth are going to break and shit like that, Missing from this game, and also from Empires in Arms, and honestly, I don't think there's a single Napoleonic game that handles it, is the concept of a maintenance cost for things. EU handles that very nicely. Now, maybe kind of the scope of the games that, the armies never really decreased based on a period of peacetime. There was no peace dividend type idea where you stop paying for your armies. It's a minor cost in the EU, but it's not a tiny cost, which is like, it costs an amount of money that it costs to conduct like a minor campaign in that game to maintain each army in the game. You also don't have to pay for movement and whatever in this as well, and you have to pay for movement of your armies in EU. But yeah, it does feel a little weird that like having a massive army doesn't have sort of a fundamental cost. But again, the idea might be that the reality is most of the cost is in building up the forces. Spain was the easiest nation to handle because they have no miners. That's just the Spanish marker under Spain there. Prussia has miners, as do Britain and Austria. And we have to worry about those. So first, I grabbed the cash for Prussia itself. And we're going to have to go into details, I guess, which is 33. I put it here. I'm using that reverse side as a 40. If I had a little white paint pen, I would replace all those. But I'm not going to worry about it here. But they have Brunswick, Hesse, Cleves, and Saxony. So now I have to look up each of those, and you can see, wow, Austria is going to be really, really painful with that big stack, as are other countries. So I have to take a look at these. Now these are not going to be here. They are in the minor country list. This is the trade chart only. here. Now, what did we have? Let's grab the chits and I'll handle each of these individually. But, you know, obviously, look, this is going to be kind of painful to do all of this here. Saxony is going to be complicated. Let's look at Cleves, which I think will be easy. H-I-J-K, because it says C on there. Okay, so it's worth $1, no trade, and no... What does the plus mean? Okay, plus is the trade. It's worth $1 basic income, no trade, and no troops. So I accumulate another $1 for Prussia for owning Cleves. Okay, that's easy enough. Hesse should be relatively similar. Okay, Hesse is $4, but with a production point. And this is where things start getting complicated, right? Because they get the $4 that they get, but I can pay that towards the nation. Now, I want to make sure that that's correct, because you see, Cleves is allied to Prussia at a 1-0. Well, if Prussia doesn't actually get that money, then Cleves's value is absolutely worthless unless it's incorporated into another nation. Here's how this is worded. Each minor country allied to a major power can produce its own troop using its own resources. The allied major power can give £4 to the minor country, but only during spring turns. The minors can't save money. As far as I can see, owning Cleves is worthless as a minor ally. It produces $1 for its own troops, of which it has none and can produce none. Okay, so let's look at these. Hesse has a unit, which I was able to hunt down and find. It's already on the board here. It's not in an army or anything. I couldn't reinforce it even if I wanted to. So its money is just wasted. Saxony has $7 and builds 2 steps per turn. Now, I pulled their detachment out and put it over here, so I remember that I can build that later. But right now I can spend 6 of that 7 to build 2 detachments of Saxons, which, what the hell, we'll put in Dresden. Why not? Okay, and that takes care of them. They have an extra $1, but there's nothing that can be done with it. When you get to the bigger minors, things like Poland and Westphalia, you're able to actually, you know, build cav corps and stuff like that. So you might actually not be able, not have such a simple situation. Now, Saxony can't afford everything, but I built both the steps that I could. Now, Brunswick is the interesting case. Brunswick has $3 and can build 1 step. I have only a Brunswick corps. There are no separate little Brunswick markers for detachments. So I can build in Brunswick, if I can find Brunswick, I can build, I don't know where Brunswick is. Some of these guys, I know where they are. Brunswick is one. I feel like it's down here somewhere, but I honestly don't know. All right, well, I'll have to find it. But Brunswick, oh, Brunswick has a single step corps. How about that? It's kind of like a detachment, but it's only 1 step. You only see that it's only 1 step by flipping it over and seeing it doesn't have a reduced side. So yeah, I can build the entirety of Brunswick's possible army each turn. Okay, and that means, you know, I'm not going to be spending any of Prussia's money on any of these. Cleves still bothers me. I feel like their $1 should go to Prussia. Wasn't too far off. It's up here next to Hanover, just a 1-hex minor country. All right. So the miners are taken care of, put these back, and now I get to start screwing around with the Prussians themselves. And again, you know, having Cleves as an ally is so fucking pointless. And there are rules where you, like in cases, have to turn things into allies instead of, you know, once you conquer them, instead of like, because you can't incorporate them, so you have to release them as allies. I guess. I mean, it's not like you would be able to absorb these all and get their income all the time, but it just feels like they should be providing some kind of force. But yeah, Cleves has no troops. Boy, I got myself dazed because I decided to look through the neutrals leader pools. So just like with normal countries, the neutrals also have their own individual leaders. And I knew I needed to do this because I had leaders, I had like a leader for Saxony on the top or something like that over here. So I started pawing through them. First of all, there's a bunch of them for 1792. Some of them are with countries, you know, like the Saxons, who are part of Prussia and should be in the Prussian leader pool, honestly. At the beginning of the game, it doesn't really matter, but it's not like I lost a Prussian leader and could have replaced him, you know, with a much better Saxon one or anything like that. But that was kind of a pain in the ass because I had to sort through. A lot of the leaders are based on these minor nations, and in some cases, they're minor nations that don't even exist yet, like Tyrol is here. Now, I don't know if Tyrol ever exists as an independent nation. It might be given as part of Italy. It's not even on the list because it's just part of Austrian national territory at this point, I guess. There's Dalmatia, which is another one that's like that. Tyrol's over here. But Tyrol did get separated from Austria. I don't know if it went to Italy or what, or maybe I'm mistaken there. I know it's possible to separate it in Empires and Arms. That may be what I'm getting confused about. But anyway, what did I do with my Prussians before I went through all this effort of sorting? And we've got a question still out there, which is Jomini up there. He's a neutral and is available as kind of a mercenary. And I got to figure out what's up with that because people might be wanting to bid on him or something. Okay. So Prussia bought 8 steppes, which is what they're allowed. One of them was a cav steppe. I'm sorry, no. 2 of them were guard steppes over here. They built an army, the Army of the Elbe, over here so that I can get a second army into play. I feel like armies are really, really important to bringing any amount of force to bear. That meant I had to shuffle leaders, and so I brought out their only army commander there, leaving a subordinate in place with him. That meant I only have a 2-star leader over here, Blucher. And I built 6 steppes of infantry back in Prussia, one of them back in Berlin because I couldn't build all 6 in Magdeburg. And I think that's it. No cav or anything. It's kind of hard to justify cav when you're running low on cash, and I needed to build the army. We'll see if these were wise choices and whatnot. At the same time, fishing out some of those neutrals, some of them, like with the Prussian leader, end up going into major power pools, essentially. So we've got, you know, Dutch fleets and generals, a Portuguese general, all kind of being deployed, and I'm putting them near that. Bavaria is over here. They've they're part of Austria. Well, they're allied to Austria, I believe. Because they're not allied to Prussia, so it must be Austria, right? I swap batteries, I go look up Jomini. Boy, well, so far I can't find him. I have looked under the scenario, flipped through the playbook looking for anything. Certainly there was no picture of him that I saw. I looked through a description of the leaders over here. Couldn't find him there. You know, all I can do is really skim to look for stuff like this. I kind of flipped through all of this, not really thinking of anywhere. Now, he might be under replacing commanders, but I don't see him there. I skim, right? Don't expect to see him under any of this stuff. Don't expect to see him in combat roles. Naval warfare sieges, he's not going to be there. He's not in the events phase, I assume. He might be in diplomacy, but I look around to see if anything jumps out about that. Shouldn't be here. I get to economics and budget. I'm vaguely expecting he might be here in the reinforcements or production. In particular, I skimmed through this. I did not do that before. But now I take a look through here, and new leader deployment, I don't see anything about Jomini. You would kind of hope that they bolded it or something, but I don't expect anything. Shouldn't be in the examples. Might he be in minors? I don't know. You know, he could be slipped in almost anywhere. He's not going to be in the major powers section. He's not going to be in the minor countries general rules, I assume. Shouldn't be in peace conditions. Special rules seems like a good place. And I look for it here. And I did look here. Get Austrian and Prussian Landwehr. Then I get to optional rules. Maybe he's optional. And I don't see him anywhere. And again, I made the same checks over here at that same level. I don't know how I'm going to fucking find him. If I had a PDF of the rules, and I don't know if there is one, I guess I could search for the name. You know, it is, first of all, I'm kind of tired, like I said. It also rained recently. See some wetness there. I would rather, it shouldn't rain today, but who knows, it might. But I would rather avoid the wet ground. That in conjunction with my sleepiness, I think I'm going to avoid going shopping today. Again, you know, it's not like I'm going to starve. It's just, I know I need to. You know, it's kind of like I'm not going to go broke because my toilet's running, but I kind of need to. One thing that I really like in a game is when it has an index, right? This game does not. This game has a glossary. Jomini is pretty obviously not in there. I looked, but damn it, you know. I mean, what the hell? Give me a rules reference on his piece, you know. It's not like you couldn't have put that on here. Would be more useful than the date, to be honest. Made the right choice. It's actually raining right now. I don't think it's going to rain heavily all day, but this was what was predicted yesterday, but then today it just said cloudy, didn't indicate any rain, but you know, there was probably a low chance and we're getting some. So I cheated. I went and looked at Banania's rewrite of the rules. And I don't think this is true. I don't think this is the only place that it can happen. I think there was something in the rules, but I can't find any reference in his rewrite of this. This card gives you Jomini. I remember reading a rule about Jomini being purchasable or something like that. Biddable. His counter says 1792. That's a 1794 card. So he's obviously like those two. If that card is indeed the only way to get him into the game, it's a relatively limited situation. But anyhow, screw it. That's what we'll go with. So where the hell am I? Well, I told you about the Prussian builds. I've taken up a ton of time on this. We're not going to go through this much discussion on any of the other economic phases, but I can tell you the economic phases are at least as painful as they are in empires in arms at this point. Okay. Now, empires in arms has, what, 4 a year? I think it's 1 every 3 months, whereas this, has 1 a year. So, but there's only 4 turns a year instead of 12. I think it's less than EU, but it's also less interesting than EU's because you're not like trying to create economic incentive or anything. I would say these are a little bit more painful because you select through units, you're looking for dates and all kind of shit like that. But the per year setup is not pleasant in my head. Austria is the next power we have to deal with. Now, Austria has 62 pounds of money, 5 commerce, fine. But here's the thing. If you look at, well, it's still there, okay? That's interesting. It's at 62 and 5 across the board. What I thought was it would incorporate all the territory they own. Now, if we look at this, look at Flanders. Flanders is Austrian from 1792 to 1798, but not after that. So apparently, I'm going to have to keep an eye out on these things to see who owns what. So, for example, Venice gets an extra, Venice is an ally of Austria, gets an extra buck from Corfu. So I'm going to have to kind of look at all of these and figure out who the fuck owns what. This might be, those control markers might be helpful in assessing this. I'm not really sure. They might just appear to be clutter. And this chart kind of tells me what the hell's going on. Since nothing's changed from the chart, I don't really feel like I want to deal with that. I also don't think that minors are included in here, which would be the real thing. Right? I think these are all major power combinations with pairs of countries so you can flip something. So Flanders right now is Austrian. France might get it, so I would take an Austria-France marker and put it there to indicate Austria owns it. But it doesn't really help me right now. And I would have to look here to see the valuation. So what I did find out, though, is that, see, this is in italics here. That means Austria just owns Flanders. It's part of their not their national territory, but at least I don't believe so. The resources of a conquered minor are written in gray italics. No matter what, it's not part of their home territory. Because that's important, because home territory is where you can build troops, I believe. This is a big deal. Let me make sure. New units must be set up in the capital or unbesieged fortress on the national territory. See, here's the problem. Let's look at conquest. Does it become national territory or not? See, integrated into national territory, it cannot become a province. Yeah, I think Flanders is actually part of Austria's national territory, and I can build troops there. That's kind of interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about it. You know, I mean, look, it's not like there's railroads or anything, but I'm not really all that convinced that like stuff would have to flow there. But what's important also is I have to look, make sure Prussia didn't have anything. So Sardinia is owned by Piedmont, Romagna by the Papacy. The Rhine doesn't exist. Turkey, Baden owns the Palatinate. I knew that. Italy doesn't exist. Austria owns Flanders. Venice owns Corfu. Bavaria owns Berg. So not a lot of these are controlled at this point. Here's the other thing. Integrated territory is not going to be a trivial thing. Like a counter, one of those control counters doesn't really show that, right? Like, let's say France is going to probably eventually conquer Flanders unless things go horribly wrong for them. And when they do, that is going to be integrated. That's part of their GE, if I recall correctly. Yeah. Austrian, 1792, French, 1805, and GE. Grand Empire, which means it automatically becomes part of France. I think upon conquest, if it's located within the Grand Empire, it must be integrated, whether it has troops or not. Yeah, no. I still have to, I just have to conquer it, sure. Okay, so at the end of a year or whatever, it would be incorporated. But I don't believe Flanders can be reintegrated into Austria under any conditions if it's conquered like that. But anyway, once it's integrated into France, look, I guess the conquered marker serves as the conquer marker for that first year where it's taken. And then after that, I just realized that it's been integrated. But I probably should have to write that kind of stuff down as I go. Anyway, I think Austria is going to get an additional 7 plus 3 parentheses 2 added to their $62 plus 5 parentheses 16.5. Yeah, a relatively huge amount of money, 84 pounds, which is more than I can record on here, even using that as a plus 40 side temporarily. So I'll resort to using dice as counters for now. On the other hand, I also have to remember what I can build, which is 16, no more than 5 of which can be cav. 2 of them can deploy directly to the army, I think. I'm not positive, because that army's not in supply. So that would seem awfully weird, wouldn't it? Let's look for that. Okay, we're in the events, the income. There we go, we're getting there. Two steps to each supplied army. Yeah, my army is no longer in supply. It doesn't have an out of supply marker, but I can't justify sending troops there at this point, right? It's not in supply. This feels kind of weird. So there's this final attrition phase, but it does not affect, and this makes perfect sense to me during normal campaigning seasons, right? It does not affect, it's not hit by attrition because it moved to get into this position. But because it was the winter turn, right? And the winter turn is short and gets that winter quarters coming up more quickly and whatever. When you consider that, that's saying, they probably were actually in winter quarters, right? For real. As opposed to the turn ended shorter just because it ended shorter. And when you start considering that it's in winter quarters without supplies down here in Orléans, feels like they should have suffered something for that. Feels like there should be a special winter attrition check that's in addition. Just if you end the turn out of supply, you'd get hit. In a way that the other turns wouldn't, because the other turns are indicating a more steady movement. But on the other hand, what might make more sense is that you'd have to fall back from out of supply positions. Now, obviously, there's a strength point that could stay here and be in supply, and that's fine. But, you know, I can't supply a whole army off of the city. Also going to have to juggle carefully here. So, up here I have a Prussian leader, that's fine. Up here I have an Austrian leader. He's under siege. I assume I can't just get him out of Reims. But I have an army leader here under tension. I probably want to create another army. Now I have another army leader here under Wormster, but this turn I just got one more army leader, this Coburg guy, who can only command 12 steps, but is kind of good. He's got a 4 initiative and a 2 combat rating. So he's probably my most attractive leader. Wormster, though, is big. Oh, I bet he's not as an army commander, he drops down to a 3. So that's kind of interesting. Does he go up to a 4? He does not. But I got to kind of make sure. So what you can't do is you can't, like, you have to make sure you have the leaders to command the forces that you have on the board, or you're going to be overstacked and you're going to run into problems because of that. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Look, I have some 2-star leaders who can command armies as well. So that's actually another option I have. I'm not limited. So a 3-star leader is what I need if I have 6 steps, unless I have an army. In those cases, it's possible that a 2-star leader could be in charge. Probably not optimal, though. I thought, oh, I got to do all the minors first. I started doing the Austrians. I built an army in Italy down here, and a very small one, but I could add 2 steps to it. But yeah, then I hunted for Baden, and now I'm like, yeah, let's just do all the minors. Worked through them, building a couple of detachments and a 1-step corps. For Venice, first thing is, I thought about building Venice's fleet. Have that over here. You're like, that's a good idea, right? Let's build a fleet. Fleets cost $20. Venice produces 8. So yeah, not going to waste my money on that. Looks like I have to fix my my charger is not working, but the battery that I had in my other camera looks like it's charged, so I'll swap them. But the other thing I was looking at, so looking at building a Lombard unit, and I can't find any pieces for Lombard, or Lombardia. They're counted as troop building. Now that works fine when they're part of Italy, but I don't think they produce troops for the Austrians, so I'm just not going to give them any. I flip through all of these. Unless they're here in the Italy pile, I don't think so. So they're not gonna get, you know, that's 2 steps that I could have built if they had any forces. Of course, many of these nations are just providing me with, cannon fodder when it comes down to it, stuff that I've had my core with. Lombardy is not the only thing like that. Thuringia also, up here, does not have any troops of its own either, except if incorporated, I guess, into Westphalia, I'm guessing. No, into the Rhine. Okay. I don't know what goes into Westphalia. I'll have to look that up, but, only the French can create it, so. Hanover, maybe? Yeah. But probably other things, too. I'm thinking Hesse. Hansa goes straight to France. Hesse goes straight to France. I don't know what else goes into Westphalia. Brunswick. Oh. Anyway, we'll worry about it when we get to it. But yeah, I've gotten all the minors dealt with now. Notably Bavaria, this is the interesting one. They have a leader as well. I don't have to put the leader with the Bavarians, but I just feel like it's better if, the minor troops have... It's not like he's that great a leader or anything, right? Yeah, I'm getting pretty fatigued right now. Why? Oh, I don't want to add the detachment to the militia because the detachment costs more than the militia do. And are not, like, I don't even know if you can. And there's no real reason you would, because the stacking is by step rather than anything else throughout the entire game. So there's no reason you would incorporate something better into something shitty. And you're not allowed to incorporate something shitty into something better. So there you go. Now that's a big difference. In Empires in Arms, you can take... You can in this too. I was going to say, you can take losses on your militia. You can take losses on your militia in this too. It's, there's still you got to take, a majority of the higher morale units or whatever. But, which kind of reflects the militia being improved into better forces or whatever. If you concentrate on taking losses on militia. So... but you can't just absorb a militia strength point into a regular corps. You got to let them die somehow to have that kind of abstraction happen. We haven't gotten to the Corsairs yet. We'll get to them when we do the British income. They have not... Well, actually, I don't think they're doing anything right now, because Britain and France aren't at war. But I don't know that there's a restriction that the Corsairs can only affect the British when they're at war. I kind of assumed that and didn't send any escorts out, though, so I'll probably ignore them this turn. Oh, now I got a problem. We got things listed here, so like guard infantry is all these different light cav, reserve cav, guard cav. I don't know what reserve cav is. I haven't seen any of that. I have cuirassiers. I think that's what they mean by reserve cav. Like, I think this is just a typo, essentially. Because French guard cav, let's see how good that is. Yeah, guard cav has some special rules, I think, having something to do with it. Well, no, it's only the old guard that has special rules. I don't think these count as guard cavalry. If I look here, guard cav, French elite cavalry corps. It seems to me to be only the French one. Now, these are not light cav, they're cuirassiers. And I think this is a valid point increase on them, but I'm just not sure, you know. But I don't believe there's anything called reserve cav in the game. There's the Austrian Reserve Corps, but that's an infantry unit, and is strangely not here. Good Lord. Does not have its own cost. Let's look at the Austrian Reserve, make sure it's not cav. That's Prussian. Yeah, so here's the Reserve Corps. We have some of them on the board. I think they're just line infantry when it comes down to it. They're just slightly better. But like, there's not really a good matchup between these different things that are present. The purchase of engineers and depots is not really covered in the reinforcement rules. It is covered over here in terms of what you have to pay to get things. Uh-oh. I haven't been counting to see artillery steps that I built. That's another buck. $2 off Prussia, 1 off Austria. I gotta get these. Austria may give some money to Prussia. They're allowed to give, how much? They're allowed to give up to $6 to another nation. And Prussia's so low on cash, just as they are in Empires in Arms. Like, Prussia's so funny, because they start the 1805 scenario in Empires in Arms with this huge cavalry army that there's almost no way they could build. Like, they just will never have the money to build that army back if they lose it. Unless Britain funds them. There's something very screwy in the economics of this. If I build this corps at full strength, it costs me $6 plus 1 for the artillery in it. $7, great. If I build half the corps and a detachment, it costs me $6 and I can integrate the detachment. It gets the artillery for free. This pisses me off. There's something so wrong about that. Like, it's obvious that, like, you should have to pay for that extra artillery. And in fact, I kind of beginning to think that you shouldn't just be able to use corps. You shouldn't just be able to use detachments to reinforce corps. The rules say you can. It seems like if there's an artillery cost, you should have to pay that. But it actually specifically exempts it, and I could build within stacking limits half a corps and a detachment, and I get the artillery for free in that case. Anyhow, I have, let's put another leader down here. Who's this? Whoever he is, he's available to me. Put Colorado and this in there. Give me a little bit extra padding. I have built the Austrians. They built a significant amount of forces, but less than, they didn't exceed half the force in the Prussian army of the Elbe. And I built an army of Italy. Built that down here, gave a different commander, switched Wormster up there to have the better commander closer. He's not going to be commanding more than 12 units. It would have been advantageous for me to build further forward, to build the army further forward, but the problem with that is I had 6 steps here. I wanted to build another 6-step force up here. I don't have enough 3-star leaders to handle everything. Now, I could have given one of the armies to a weaker leader. I certainly didn't need, well, that's actually my biggest army, probably, with the Prussians included and everything. But anyway, I'm trying not to move leaders around too much and whatnot. And we shall see what we see. That means that we did Austria, Russia. France is going to be next. And I'm pooped. So I'm going to put this here on economics and budget for France. Austria, I don't think they spent their full 6 on money for Prussia, but with the artillery that had to be bought, and I picked up another supply train just so that that Prussian army can function better. It's running its supplies out of the Palatinate, I believe. Right? Or is it Cleves? No, it's running it out of Cleves. I don't remember. Who owns what? Palatinate is owned by Turkey? No. By Baden? No. So it's got to be Cleves is owned by Prussia. So I can run my supplies out of there. I've got a depot here which is supplying this unit here. This unit is, of course, out of supply, which is problematic. But I'm hoping the Prussians can try to save things. But the French get 2 free armies. They get all their production and everything. Their troops are gotten better because of the Carnot card. They're going to be pretty potent. And I still have the Valmy card in hand, which is useful to either prevent a loss from being as damaging, or to win a tied battle, which the latter is probably the better result. But if I suffer a loss where I think I had a shot at winning, where I went in with good strength and whatnot. The French are also fighting in their home territory, which means I can produce huge quantities of troops wherever I like. So I think the coalition is not in anywhere near as good a shape as I thought they were. This was definitely an overextension. I'm kind of glad, but my mind was set on this. Ooh, France is really easy to take out. Yeah, but they won't be after they get their, 70 production? I don't remember, what is it? 70 production. 79 because they get their commerce as well, as far as I can tell. I think they get their commerce anyway because of I like Empires and Arms' rules much better. But if we take a look at the where the fuck the commerce rules are, this is taking forever to go through this, but here we go. No trade is collected by Britain if part of the continental system. France receives trade for each harbor, which represents the increase of the French trade over French allies. Now, the way that's worded, it sounds like maybe I shouldn't get the French harbors, in which case I wouldn't get the French trade, except I'm at peace with Britain anyway, and they're gonna get that money. So I don't know what to do. But I really don't think France should get a significant portion of the trade money, because honestly, that's probably mainly going into smuggling. But anyway, the continental system is kind of wacky. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference in the game to give France additional cash for their harbors. But Empires and Arms' system makes a lot more sense to me, where if you're at peace with Britain and not part of the continental system, Britain gets the trade money and you get your portion of the trade money. And you get a better portion than Britain does. But because Britain is getting trade money from everyone, it's particularly ugly. You can really hurt Britain's cash influx by denying them trade. But the thing is, if you're like a French ally like Spain or Prussia or something like that, you might not want to be in the continental system. And in Empires in Arms, you have the option to, you can ally with France and not be part of the continental system. If France takes it as a peace condition, then you have to comply for like a year or whatever, but then you can start refusing, and then France can declare war on you for that. But and likewise, it gives France a reason to attack Spain. In this game, I think the Spanish invasion is going to be triggered more by these event cards and stuff like that. Because obviously, France does not want to antagonize Spain the way they did historically, right? Like, unless there's some kind of political reason for it. Now, enforcement of the continental system is not why France ends up essentially trying to take over Spain. But it might have been a contributing factor. Anyhow, we got lots of shit coming in for the French, including these, which come in, you know, along with production. It's just a free unit as far as I can tell. And importantly, we have the armies to play around with. Yeah, but right now I need to break. Maybe we'll be able to do France and Britain in one big swoop. Here to do the French, I don't think I can do both the French and English in one shot. Because the French have, you know, 79 bucks coming in that fills them up to 79. They can build 16 combat units. I've got a lot of juggling to do. I've got a couple of armies to build. Their size being determined by the leadership value, right? So I flip over their leaders, and most of them are only 12 command capability as opposed to the 16 that Tension has. Coburg only has a 12. Wormster has a 16. Wormster's actually probably higher rank, but you can't really necessarily tell that. But he'll, you know, I'll use the better initiative as the army leader when I move into place, because I am allowed to replace people. So yeah, the leadership is a complexity that I have to cope with. I also have to cope with the fact that these are the new leaders I get this turn. There's just piles and piles of French leaders come into the game each turn. You can see quite a few over here. So I got to really kind of work to balance out what the hell I'm going to do with them. Okay, well, that wasn't too bad, I guess. I built my 2 armies. I could have built up to 2 more, and actually I have enough cash left at 10 bucks to have put another army on the board. The problem is I got 12 stacking points, or 12 steps I can put in each army. And I feel like size really matters here in this particular point of time, where there's not a lot of terrain to maneuver in, or different areas of the board to be focusing on. I'm not at war with Spain or England. So I focused on the 2 armies I built. One of which here, I made the army of Germany there. And since I got the army of Spain for free, I put it there. I would have put it here if I had bought another army, the army of the North, just to keep the names where I want them. But I decided I just don't have the troops to build another army. I mean, I could have built, I had enough strength points to build another army. Right? But what I didn't have was enough troop counters left in the game. So I used up most of my detachments. Now, I used up all my strength points that I'm allowed to build at this point. And I could build more on another turn. And I filled out all the damaged units that were here, including militia that were damaged, which are cheaper to build. I didn't have any militia left. I think they're really kind of for this scenario, but also sort of as a, you can leave them behind in places just to make sure that the enemy can't take something real easy. Yeah. And then I put leaders pretty much everywhere. Not here at Roquefort for some reason. But that's okay. It's just a detachment. I mean, really, the detachments are going to mainly flow elsewhere if they're needed. But my main focus is to get the armies moving. However, as I leave, especially Paris, I may decide I need to leave a force there. Although, without it being a fortress, it's kind of not worth defending. Well, what about these guys? Who's there? I just left him in charge. He might not be who I want there. Does he have 6 stacking points? He only has 4. So I could put another leader there instead. Put him there. And I don't know if this is the guy I want. See, I have 301s I could use, but they're 3 stars. I want to hold a couple of 3 stars in reserve. So I'm looking around. Doesn't look like anything's heading this way, so this guy might not be that big a deal. The Spanish could come in, so I think I'll jump this over there. This is a 3-star as well, and a pretty decent one in terms of total leadership value. But I have a couple of good leaders left. Christine. Yeah, I'll put this here. That's fine. So I mean, I can afford to put army commanders in charge of, little forces, just for the sake of whatever the hell. It doesn't really make much difference. That gives them a little bit more flexibility in terms of movement, because a detachment or a corps on its own can only move on there's a single counter where they're allowed to move. So it might be useful to have that extra flexibility. For that, I might as well put somebody down here at Roquefort as well. Just because. I didn't put anyone at Boulogne with the militia there. They're just sitting there to try to prevent a British crossing from being too easy. And then I'm set up to do the Brits next. And yeah, it's kind of tiring. I guess that's the thing. And I kind of wanted to go to sleep anyway, but I convinced myself to come up here because I'm like, well, I really should get a little bit more done. But it's hard to stay bent over pondering all the troop purchases. But yeah, the French army is not as big as you would expect. And actually, it's not like, I mean, I'm missing all the big toys, all the guards and some of the cav and whatnot. But I'm not actually missing much in the way of direct infantry, and that makes sense. France is France. They can only put so many troops on the board, essentially. That will grow, again, when I get more toys. But right now, this is all I got. And I'm looking at, an army that I think is bigger than, say, Austria's army, but not by a lot. And Austria and Prussia together definitely have a larger army, so I may have my issues still. I was thinking, lots of armies, big stacks. Well, my stacks are only 12 as opposed to the 16 that this can hold and that this army can hold. Not that it's that big. I don't know. How big are, I wouldn't know this as the French. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 there at Elba. And, oh, but there's a third army too. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 for the Army of the Rhine. That's the one that's kind of trapped in a stupid location. The Italian army is quite small. It's like 8. And that's here? Yeah. But, you know. All right. I'll get to the Brits next. The Brits probably don't matter because I don't think they can come into play. Well, they can come into play if the war starts going really, really well for the French and they decide to plunge across and take Flanders, right? Let's see. Yeah. Though diplomacy could also be used to bring them in. So that's an issue too. We'll get to that when we get to it. My back hurts. Okay, so the English produced, what was it? 103 points. Is that it? 90? 103. They had 8 left before, so they had 111 to play with. Now they're at 42. Which is within that 49 that you can actually track using those counters, so I'm not going to look it up. I'm assuming that they're fine with that. They just got Nelson this turn, so they built him. And actually, fuck. I screwed up. Shipyards are the white boxes. I built them in the wrong place. But each shipyard can only build 1 navy. So we're going to have Nelson show up here at Newcastle, and I guess we'll have Jarvis or whatever show up over here. He can sail around. It's no big deal. I didn't build any decoys. I could have, but I don't see any point to that at this point. Now, and I built everything I could, which was a pretty limited amount of force. It is Britain, after all. 6 strength points, or 6 stacking points, 2 of which can be cav, and I filled these out a little bit more tightly. Also, Holland and Hanover built some more troops. Portugal built some more troops. Holland built most of its army. I gotta say, the miners are really a fucking pain. It's so hard. You know, there's a flag there with a number on top of it sometimes. The detachments have a number on top of them, even if there's no number. The leaders have this tiny flag. Let's see, here's orange. There's a tiny flag over in the corner there to tell you whose they are. So it's sometimes really tough to spot who's a leader of what, etc. It's hard in EU as well. But most of the miners don't have leaders. Here, a lot of them do. So, you know, usually the miners who have a leader are really notable people, right? I'm trying to think of an example. I mean, look, in the campaign game, you know, Frederick the Great is with a miner, but because there's no Prussian player in the campaign game. But that's a major power in some of the scenarios, at least. But yeah, you've got like some of the Bavarians leaders showing up, and certainly some of the Poles, some of the Hungarians, stuff like that. But it's spaced over a long game. There's usually no more than a couple of them on the board at any one time. Here, many of the bigger miners have a leader or so. I ended up banking, that 42 points. Yeah, I'm not rolling for Corsairs or doing anything with them because England's not at war. So, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing they can do. Now I got to go down and do some clan stuff, but for raid. But that's going to put us into the diplomacy phase. Now, because this is a spring turn and diplomacy is especially different in the spring turns, I'm going to do that. I'm going to get this all in this video. We're not going to, go into the amount of detail of production that we did early on in this video. But, again, but I figure I ought to show mechanisms in some light at least. All right. Okay, since I'm playing this as a two-player game, diplomacy will follow the two-player rules, I guess. I'm a little iffy still about whether or not this can be played multiplayer for this scenario. There are no different victory conditions. Conceptually, though, there's no restriction on it being non-multiplayer, on being, on not including other players. And conceivably, everybody could kind of join the coalition and win with France, if that was the case, or like anyone could. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Outside of that, then you end up with, okay, if you didn't follow that, Britain and Spain, if they were players, could just join the war now, because they're going to join the coalition eventually. I think I said coalition, I just meant join with France. They're going to join the coalition eventually. They might as well do it right away, so there's no restrictions on them there. That is not too different from, say, the campaign scenario, except that each nation has individual victory conditions in the campaign scenario, and have reasons that they might not want to enter the war at certain points in the game. And might even be on different sides, as Spain certainly was, but you could argue Austria and Prussia, but that's more a mechanical thing. Certainly somebody like Turkey is opposed to Austria and Russia, so unless Austria and Russia shift sides, you're not going to see that kind of stuff. I've seen games of Empires in Arms where Prussia immediately allied with France. That was very disturbing. Very disturbing. I've seen them where Prussia gave up territory to Austria too. Prussia's in a hard place in that game, and you can really kind of bully them around because of it. Really, really dangerous situation. Now, anyhow, the mechanisms for Britain or Spain entering play through like multiplayer diplomacy don't seem to be reasonable. So, I come to the conclusion that it should be a two-player game because the two different options for any kind of diplomacy in it seem like they're going to break some of the game to some extent. But here's the thing. And then there's these rules, like Spain and Prussia have to check during diplomacy phases to determine if they stay at war at France. They might get knocked out of the game by that die roll, which again doesn't really feel like a lot of reasonable, a very reasonable mechanism if you're playing one of those countries. Well, I can no longer win or lose. I'm just out of the game for now, and for the rest of it. The other side of it, if it's not a two-player only scenario, is, okay, Britain and her allies joined the coalition immediately through diplomatic action, event, or France attacks or besieges Antwerp. Event, besieges, all good. Diplomatic action, okay. Diplomatic action exists in the two-player game. However, now they join the coalition. So I don't think the French could try to sway Spain or Britain because of that. Just the way it's worded, I don't think French diplomacy is going to work that way. But, yeah, I mean, each player can attempt to influence a major power unplayed by a physical player for, I don't know what that means, right? Again, if it's a two-player game, does that make sense? But there is the by diplomatic action, by paying £4. Now, I'll tell you this much. Britain doesn't have a diplomacy marker. So maybe you can get Spain in early, but I don't think you can get Britain in early this way. But it says Britain and her allies. I just don't know what they're talking about, right? Like, does Britain have maybe a counter with no modifiers on it? Is that what they're saying? There's no actual counter, or am I supposed to do that? Outside of that, is it worth paying money to try to sway a minor into your camp? And I think, unlike EU, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So for major powers that would normally be played by a player, it makes absolute sense to be able to sway something through diplomacy. But minor power, again, you have to pay at least 4 to get a shot at it, and you need to get a 10, a 12, a 12 to shift the modifier, and you might get a modifier of a couple of pluses or something. But what are you really going to gain? Well, you could, as France, although France is, they have a few bucks. You could, as France, try to sway Holland, because your victory conditions are what? Looking for them. Thought they were here. I mean, they're here, yeah. Okay. France wins at the end of the game turn if she controls every fortress within 1792 except Corsica. And then these additional, Flanders, Holland, Switzerland, and Geneva. I can't take Flanders, though. I could conceivably swing Holland over to my side. I'm sure. Now that's allied, but it's allied to a neutral power that's not at war with me right now. France doesn't have any bonus or penalty towards it. It's an interesting thought. I need a 12, which means I'd probably want to spend a total of, I'm allowed to, what am I allowed? Each turn, each player can attempt to influence an order. One minor country not allied with another power, spending any pounds. Okay, that doesn't help. And then an embassy. Yeah, I don't think I can grab something that's controlled by another power. Minor power. A minor power immediately enters the world. The coalition may attempt a diplomacy action against a minor power allied to France if this power is part of the continental system and not a satellite state. Yeah, there are a few that I could try for. I could try for something like Denmark. Probably not worth it for France. Might be worth it for Britain, though. Denmark has a navy, I think. I mean, they have one. I don't know if they actually start with it. How do we find that out? We look here. This actually won't tell us. I don't know where would tell us. That gives me their initial. So if they switch to Allied, I believe they set up their forces at that point. But I'm kind of just at the point of, I don't know if this makes any sense. I don't know what this must wait until the last roll of the dice to know the final statuses means. We saw an example that seemed to indicate that, like, that doesn't mean you can steal it away. Here, Sweden is neutral. France spends $4 and rolls, moving Sweden to the French ally. The diplomacy phase goes, Britain plays, they target Sweden. Okay, that would normally not be legal, but keep going. And a -1 DRM for just concluded Swedish-French alliance, which is not here, but it is here. -1 DRM applies to diplomacy attempts by other powers in the current diplomacy phase. Like that's, yeah, that's the continental system, and it only affects things if the continental system, like if they just joined. It's weird, but okay. Because after a year, they're like, yeah, being allied to France sucks. We're not getting the trade we thought we were, and you're not. But France is getting trade with you, which, okay. Yeah, I think it makes sense. But I don't really see Britain spending for that. Anyway, where does it say that you set this up? It immediately enters the war allied to other bloc, and its marker is placed in France or Britain's allied. Its units are controlled by France or Britain. Okay. Now, if you look at the setup here, miners who are neutral, Britain and France, or Britain and Spain are different because they are kind of like neutral player countries, are not there. This doesn't tell me how to set up its units, but I don't know exactly what that means, right? Now, then we have minor countries rules, which tells you some stuff that doesn't apply to this. It talks about conquest. It tells you how they're conquered. Then it talks about the effects of conquest. And then it tells you how to reinstate them. I don't think they get their troops. Hold on. A minor with available combat units must be reinstated. I don't think they get any addition. They get their troops back at that point. What they get is the capability to build their troops. My best guess is give them one turn of build off of here. But that means like the Danish Navy, you're not going to get that for free or whatever. So spending the money for a couple of, for a Danish corps or something just doesn't seem terribly valuable, certainly in this scenario. If the one reason to do it is to try to bring the neutral navies into play. But if those navies don't come set up, it's kind of not worth it. Like, you still have to pay $20 per navy to do so. Right now, Britain has no additional navies, so they might want to, but probably not this turn. France, on the other hand, these are all Corsairs. They're cheaper. They actually don't have additional navies either. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Yeah, it might not be a bad choice. Anyway, Britain doesn't want to spend their money at this point. They're close to their 49 or whatever. That might be the maximum that you can have on the track. Do we have that somewhere? I don't know if we do. This is the economy. I actually don't even see a limitation scanning quickly of that 49 bucks on there that I thought might be there. Oh, maybe it's here. Each power has a limit on how many. At the end of the winter, the major powers except Britain lose all their unspent. That's actually a problem. Spain had this many. And Austria should be down to like 1. And France had nothing. Okay. I'm going to say that's right. It might not be. Again, we're talking about a difference of a couple of bucks. But I had forgotten about that. Yeah, I don't know why the nations have like $7 each. There's nothing they can do with that $7. I guess that's not true. They could build supply depots for 2. And that's probably it. Reconstituting fortresses. They can pay to reconstitute fortresses. So that money is actually kind of useless. I assumed they were allowed to keep it. Yeah, only Britain's allowed to keep money. And Britain's allowed to keep an infinite amount of money. France's big pile of cash there. I built all the troops I could. I can't do anything with my money. I could build another army, but it doesn't really serve me any purpose. So yeah, we'll wait. We might buy fortress points. I think they're a point each or something, right? Fortress, 2 points each. So that's not too bad. Okay. Then that puts us to the beginning of the action phases. And we're going to stop here. We're also going to load it up. I expect 1793 will go by on one video for all the combat and stuff, I think. But I feel like this one has eaten up a lot of video space going into the details of the interphase and the diplomacy, which are kind of special phases that only happen in Britain, except in spring, except the spring interphase has some effects that are, strangely enough, not in spring, and diplomacy has some effects that are not in spring as well. Well, actually, there's quite a few, because you're allowed to do diplomacy, the influencing minors and diplomatic actions and stuff, not in spring. The only thing you're not allowed to do, that you're only allowed to do in spring, is discussion between players. So if players want to cut some kind of deal. Let's take a look at announcements, because that feels like you might be able to like maybe make announcements without leaving the table or something. That might be the deal with that. Okay, that won't be here. That'll be in here. What we did not look at, announcements. In diplomatic sequence, each player takes his turn to, someone will know. Yeah, okay, so this has things like request an alliance, an agreement, break an alliance, declare war. It feels like you can make all those things. Spring. Oh, this is an example. That's not helpful. I'm looking for, what is it here? I'm looking for discussion between players, negotiations. Players can talk when conducting diplomatic discussions only during negotiations. During all other turns, they can communicate only through written messages called postmail. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a great idea. Hold on, I'm writing a paragraph or 8. Negotiations can occur during any turn, but this option will increase game length. Yeah, I'm not so sure if people are actually writing things down. You know, I could see brief discussions, no more than 5 minutes or something like that on every turn, except for once a year or something along those lines. I'm certainly not going to play with that rule at all. I think that is an unreason. Not that we're playing with the multiplayer diplomacy anyway, but when we get to the campaign scenario for 1805 onward, I'm not playing with that. That just doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Diplomacy, the reality, knowing it from like Empires in Arms, especially, and War and Peace, diplomacy is a really, really rare thing. Like, what ends up happening, and this is why they don't want the negotiations phase, is that people sit around, people go to each other and they talk to each other, and everybody talks to everybody and absolutely nothing changes. So, you know, with me running the diplomacy and whatever, I can look at the situations, roll a die and whatever. The vast majority of diplomacy is just not going to happen. And when you're playing Empires in Arms, yeah, in the first few turns of the game, you probably talk to everyone, and then the game becomes settled, you know, in terms of like, look, these alliances aren't going to change or anything unless you bring something exciting to the table. So I think that's what they're trying to do, is prevent people from going again and again. All right, up it goes.